I've always loved cemeteries. I love them perhaps a little less as I rapidly approach the end of my own life, but I find them delightful, whether they're in Egypt or elsewhere in the Middle East or indeed in the Upper Hunter. There's something enchanting about these sweet, sad places, and the demography of cemeteries in Australia is really very funny. For example, you will still find almost everywhere that the mix and the proddies aren't buried together, that there's a Catholic cemetery and a Protestant cemetery. And recently one of my dearest friends, Hanna Kay, discovered, would you believe, in the most unexpected place, a Jewish cemetery. Now, that to me is unutterably poignant.
I've been approached to do the Maitland project, the Maitland Jewish Migration project a while ago. And I was a little reluctant because my work does not carry itself to a narrative that includes symbolism of culture and Judaism. But I was convinced to go ahead and do it when I visited the cemetery, the Jewish cemetery. Now, cemeteries at best of time are an interesting place. They are a meeting of culture and nature. But this one was an abandoned one, so you had this overgrown grass, crumbling tombstones, and these vast spaces of rural Australia.
Maitland Jewish Cemetery sits on the edge of West Maitland, next to what is now the showground, behind horse farms. It sort of sits out in the open. It was acquired in 1846 as a burial place for members of the Jewish community.
Wherever around in New South Wales and the other states that there were Jews that thought there might be a community forming, the first thing they put in place was a cemetery. And most places it was in hand with the local general cemetery, but here at Maitland and at Goulburn were two where it was on private land owned by members of the rudimentary community. So this is one of two standalone Jewish cemeteries in regional New South Wales that still exist in some form.
The first burials there were in 1849. One was an 11-month-old little girl and one was an 11-year-old girl, Hannah and Jane Cohen. They were cousins. And over the period of the active use of the cemetery, there are about just under 50 people that we know were buried there. The last burial that's recorded was in 1934, but the peak of the burials is in the mid to late 19th century.
It's very odd being here in this cemetery. It's my ancestor. It's in the middle of a paddock. There are horses. There's a smell of horses. I'm just thinking of these people that came here almost 200 years ago. And they had this aspiration, and now they end up in this dilapidated, neglected cemetery.
My first visit to Maitland took place in the early 1970s after I discovered that my great-great-grandparents, Samuel and Rachel Lewis, were buried in the Jewish cemetery. Unfortunately, it took a while to discover them because in the early 1970s the cemetery was almost overgrown.
Cemeteries are not only places of human memory, that they're also places of memories of fauna and flora. In the cemeteries of Australia there's more biodiversity than anywhere else.
The stories that emanate from knowing about the individuals that are there. So the members of the Cohen family, many of whom are all related somehow to the big business firm David Cohen and Company, which was established in Maitland and eventually relocated to Newcastle. There are also people like Daniel Frisch, who came from Hungary and worked in Morpeth, or someone like Robert Lipman and other members of the Lipman family who are buried there, and a range of people with occupations like publicans, storekeepers, and those stories come out of the cemetery.
I mean, look at these stones. I mean, somebody had to carve these letters. They are all Hebrew letters. Can you imagine somebody that knew the language 200 years ago in the fields, in the prairies of Maitland? They were somewhere from England. It just feels odd. It feels odd. And I've done a very similar journey to them. They came from Europe somewhere, to parents that probably came from Eastern Europe. I came also from that side of the world. I was born to parents that were born in Eastern Europe, and I ended up in the Hunter. They ended up in the Hunter. It's very surreal.
The cemetery also tells the story more broadly of Maitland itself, how Maitland boomed in the mid-19th century and then declined as Newcastle took over. The symbol of it is the synagogue itself, which was built in 1879 at a moment when they thought, okay, this is our home, this is our faith, our religious practice. But somewhat ironically, 1879 more or less marks the beginning of the decline in the numbers of the Jewish community and the relocation to either Newcastle or back to Sydney.
When I was walking around, it hit me that the names that are inscribed on the gravestones, which usually it will show the kind of culture that was buried there, but the Jewish people carried with them Hebrew name and the English name, which was both of them different. So it moved me to deciding to do this project.
Since the cemetery has not been actively used, it's gone through a really interesting history in itself. It's been under flood, and you get that feel of the water having at times gone over it because the gravestones themselves just have that feel about them. But it's also attracted spasmodically attention from different people with interest. The Australian Jewish Historical Society. By the 1970s, the cemetery was in a fair state of neglect, fairly overgrown. It was reconsecrated in 1979. There was a reconsecration service.
In every way, they are our story. They're pages in our history. And yet, right around this country, they're either dying from neglect or they're dying from planning decisions.
The next decade saw, under legislation available, Maitland City Council taking over the care of the cemetery. And since then it's been on the maintenance program of cemeteries looked after by Maitland City Council. And there's still a lot of work to be done, but it's there to tell the stories that it has to tell.
But the fact that the cemetery is there was an inspiration to Hanna. So she started evoking it as only she can in her quite remarkable paintings. They are intensely beautiful and deeply moving, and they're a paradox.
One of the things that I decided to look into was into the landscape. So I decided to look into creating a sense of a journey by showing pictures that give you a sense of the passage of time, but also by using water as a thread that is woven through the artwork. I try to show these elements of movement and change, and using reflection to depict layers of memories that show you past, present, and future.